friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I've got a card for you using Hello Bluebird's Word Buddies Jungle and the Jungle Littles. So I've stamped out my images in Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock. And I'm going to choose a piece of pattern paper to match my coloring to. So I'm taking a piece from the Echo Park Pool Party 6x6, and I'm just going to tuck that under the edge of my cardstock so I can pull from that color palette. I'm going to start by coloring in my little elephant, and I'm going to do her in some warm grays. So I chose W1, W3, and W5. I'm going to cast a little shadow on her trunk because it's kind of upturned and curved towards her face so it wouldn't be catching the light. And I'm going to add a little shadow to the back of her head and the edge of her ears, the back of her arm and her body and her little legs. And then I'll come in with my W3 and begin to blend that out. I want to work over the edge of that W5 and make sure that it is nice and smooth, and just break down the edge of that pigment so that I can get a really soft blend. Once I have that W3 laid in everywhere I want it, I'm going to color the rest of her with the W1. So the most of her is going to be the highlighted area. I just kept my shadows right to the edge so that she could be really soft. I didn't want her to get too dark. I wanted to keep her a little bit more light in this scene. So I did decide to grab the W00 for a little bit of her face and her belly just to lighten that part up even further. Then I'm moving on to my lion, and I wanted him to have a really golden tone. So I picked YR20, YR21, and YR23. Starting with the YR23 and kind of outlining his face, casting a little shadow under his hair and on the tops of his ears and the underside of his cheeks and chin, and then also a little shadow on his forepaws where his head would be casting a shadow, and on his hindquarters, and then blending that out with the YR21. And then I'll fill in the rest of his face and paws and body with the YR20. Then for his mane and tail, I'm going to use E23, E25, and E27. And I'm going to keep that E27 closest to his face, and then also put a little extra shadow around his ears. And then I'll blend that out with the E25, and I'm going to save a little room on the very edges for that lightest shade, the E23. And once I finish with his mane, I'm going to color his tail with those same exact shades. I just put the E27 on the underside and then blend it out with the E25 and the E23. For the monkey, I'm going to do him in two parts. So for his face and the insides of his ears and his little foot, I'm going to use E50, E51, and E53. Because he's facing a little more toward the left, I'm doing a little extra shadow on the right hand side. So I use the E53 as my darkest and blend it out with the E51, and then use the E50 for my highlight. And then for the rest of his body, I'm going to use E55, E57, and E59. And again, I'm going to keep the shading heavier on the right hand side, and then just add little touches on the left to give him that definition. I'm also going to color in his tail with these shades. So once I have the E59 laid in, I'll start to blend that out with the E57, and then I will save a little bit of room for the E55. Also put a little of that E57 in the curve of his tail, because where it is kind of turned under, that wouldn't be catching the light either. and then I'll fill the rest of him in with the E55, and I really like this combination for this guy. I think this might be my favorite combo for monkeys. So I do have a Copic Favorites Jungle Critters up already. I don't think there's a monkey in that one yet, but that was only part 1, so part 2 will be coming eventually. I use the E57 for his nose, and then for all of their ears and rosy cheeks, I'm going to use R11 and R20. So I just do a little oval shape on the cheeks with the R20, and then I trace around the edges of that with the R11, and that kind of softens it up into the color of their fur or skin. And then for the ears, I just add a little kind of circular shape with the R20, and then I'll blend out the bottom edge of that with the R11. And I just do that right over top of the coloring that I've already done, so it looks a little bit more natural. Next, I'm going to do the vine, and I wanted to pull in the colors of those really dark green leaves. So I chose G94 and G99. I thought I might throw a third shade in there, but I decided to just keep it to the 2 because there wasn't a lot of space in there to try to squeeze in a third shade. So I just put the G99 on the underside and then blended toward the top with the G94. I am going to use those same shades for the leaves, but I will throw in a third shade on those. I'm using the G99 toward the base of each leaf, and then also kind of going up the center of the leaf where the little line is drawn. I'm blending that out with the G94, but I'm not taking that all the way to the tip. Like I said, I just wanted a bit more contrast on the leaves to separate those out. So I am going to pull in a third shade, and for that I will use the G43, which has a lot more of a light tone in there, so it's going to really soften up the ends of each of those leaves. So I'm going to go over those, and then once I finish them up, I'm going to go back to my darkest shade, that G99, and just go over that center line once again and really create that contrast where those leaves are creased. And then while I'm at it, I'm also going to color in a couple more leaves. I'm going to do some different colors today because I want to really pull from that pattern paper. I really like how they have some blue leaves and some aqua leaves. So I'm going to use that as my cue and just do something that I wouldn't normally think of on my own. Normally I would just think to do all the leaves in green. So I really like using pattern paper as an inspiration for this kind of thing. So I did 2 extra leaves in that darker olivey green combo, and then I'm going to switch to some blues. I'm going to use B93, B95, B97, and B99, and I'm going to do the 2 larger leaves. So I'm starting with that B99, and I'm doing a line down the center and then also a little shadow on the bottom edge of each leaf. And then I'll go over that and blend that out with the B97. So you could skip the B93 if you wanted to and just use 3 markers, but I really like the wide contrast that you get, especially with these darker shades, by adding in that 4th marker. So I use the B95 next to blend out the B97, and then left a little room on each of those leaves for the highlight shade, which is my B93. So these leaves are pulling from those dark blue leaves on the pattern paper. This was the closest I could get with the Copics that I have. These B95s have a lot of gray tone in them, so they really represent those navy blue leaves nicely. I really love how that Jungle Littles stamp set has so many different varieties of leaves included in it. All of these leaves are from that stamp set because you can really create some nice full scenes with a lot of different foliage, and I think it really does look like a jungle because there's just so much variety. So I think that's really fun, and that's definitely a great stamp set to have in your stash and to combine with a whole bunch of other different images. So the next leaves I'm going to do are going to represent the aqua leaves in that pattern paper. So I'm using BG11 and BG13. For this one, I just started with a coat of BG11 solid, and then I'm coming back in with the BG13 and just adding a touch of that at the base of each leaf. And then for this long leaf, I'm going to do it more like I did those blue Monstera leaves or whatever they are, by kind of doing the line down the center and then also a little line on each of those sections, and then blending out with the BG11, and I also added in the BG10. For the banana, I chose Y11, Y13, and Y15. So I'm doing a little Y15 on the bottom edge, blending up with the Y13, and then the Y11. And then for the ends, I decided to pull in the E47, and I just added a bit of that. And then I'm also going to use these same yellows on a few of the party accessories. I'll do some of the stripes on the party hats. So I did one with the shadow on the left and the other one with the shadow on the right. And then I'm going to do some orange. So I wanted to pull in those little pops of orange in the centers of the flowers. And then there's also a few orange flowers on there as well, but they're more of a dusty orange. So I picked YR12, YR14, and YR18, and also colored in my last little leaf with those shades. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of that orange to the top of that last party hat. For my hot pink, I'm going to use RV13, RV14, and RV17. I'm going to do the bottom stripe on the first party hat. I'm going to do the star on the second party hat, and then the top stripe on the third party hat. I just did all three of them at the same time because they were such small little areas. And then I'm also going to use these shades to do the balloon. So I'm trying to do a little rim light by using my darkest shade, the RV17, to do kind of a O shape in the center of the balloon, but close to the edge, but not all the way up to the edge. And then blending out on either side of that with the RV14, and then going all the way to the edge with the RV13 and also filling in the center. So that kind of gives it a little bit more of a transparent look. And then I wanted a bit of a darker aqua, so I pulled in BG32, BG45, and BG49. And I'm going to do the top of my first party hat, the bottom stripe on my last party hat, and then the entire party hat for the one with the pink star. So I just shaded them in the direction that I plan to put them on the card on the critters. Then I'll grab a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and go over my critters' eyes to make them nice and bright and shiny. And then I will trim these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm taking a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock. I've set that out on my Waffle Flower mini media mat. And then I'm going to paint on a background using some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink. So I just press some of that down on my work surface, and I'm picking that up with a paintbrush and just painting all over the background, just kind of messily. I just want to create some parts that are lighter and some parts that are darker. I want it to be kind of organic and not too precise. But I do want to keep the outside edges white. So I'm just sticking to the center of that panel, and then I'll grab my heat tool and dry that back so that I can add another layer on top of that just to create even more depth. So I'm going to pick up some more of that paint and just go right over top with the same color. And that way I'll get even more of those lighter areas and darker spots and just create a lot of dimension in that background. Once I'm finished with that, I'm actually going to dry it one more time with my heat gun so that I can add a little bit of splatter detail over the top. I wanted that to be in a darker contrasting color. I thought about doing black, but then I remembered that there was that really dark navy in that pattern paper, so I decided to use chipped sapphire for that instead. So I'm going to add some water to that paint and then use a much smaller paintbrush to pick that up and tap it against my finger so it creates all of those tiny little flecks. Just creates a little bit more interest on that background panel. And I made sure that I had a nice variety of larger and smaller droplets. And then I'm going to set this panel aside to dry. While it does, I'm going to choose one more piece of pattern paper that I think will go well with our initial piece that I used as my inspiration. I was pretty sure I wanted to go with that teal print, that dusty teal, but I went back and forth just double checking in case I wanted the pink, but I did decide to go with the teal. So I'm going to trim these down with the Gallery Frame number 2 from Hello Bluebird. So the frame actually cuts out the scalloped border and then also the inner piece. So I'm going to die cut this twice. And then the inside pieces I can just save for another project. But I'm going to end up with 2 frames, so I could actually create 2 different cards. For the one today, I'm going to use the floral scallop and then the teal inner piece. But I will definitely save those other parts and create another card in the future. So for today, I'm going to take these 2 pieces and I'm going to tape them back together because I want to be able to pop them up with foam tape. So I want them to be one unit again. So I'm just taking some Scotch Magic Tape and I'm going to just tape those together. I tore it in half just so that it would be small enough to fit and wouldn't stick out past that border. So I did that on all 4 sides, and then I cut down some Scotch 3M foam tape into some strips and just trimmed those right down the center so it would, kind of brace up the edges of that frame and help me be able to pop that up and give it some dimension on my card. The only one I'm not going to do is on that center bar because I want to be able to tuck some things underneath it, and I didn't want the foam tape to be in the way. So I'm going to peel off those release papers. I did trim that background piece down just slightly so it would be smaller than this frame so that I can line that up and have it be completely behind the frame with no sides showing. I didn't have that on quite straight the first time, so I just readjusted that and popped that down into place. So I'm going to set that aside and work on my sentiment. And this is actually another piece of pattern paper from that same paper pad from Echo Park, the pool party. It's just a plain navy blue piece. I treated that with my EK Success powder tool, and now I'm stamping that down in Versamark ink, which is just a clear sticky embossing ink that grabs a hold of your embossing powder. So I'm going to sprinkle some white embossing powder over top of that, and then I will heat set that with my heat tool to make sure that it is all melted and shiny white. I usually like to heat it up from the back side first and then go from the front until everything is nice and bright white. And then I just clean that off with a microfiber cloth to get any of that remaining dust off. Then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI, and I'm using a piece of MFT's Snow Cone cardstock, and I'm going to stamp on the inside using Lawn Fawn's Peacock ink. And I'm doing the little gorilla because I adore him. I didn't stick him on the front of this card because I really wanted those other critters, but I had to use him on this card. So I put him on the inside with a couple leaves and the sentiment that says "Wild About You." Then I'm taking the Jane Small Alpha dies and die cutting that out of some Lawn Fawn raspberry cardstock, and I'm spelling out the word party and just taping those into place with a little bit of Post-it tape so that I can run that through my die cutting machine. Then I'm ready to glue my background and card front onto my card base. So I just used a little liquid glue, made sure that that was pressed down securely, and then I can add in my images. I'm going to start with this little vine, and I'm going to have to trim it down just slightly to make sure that it fits under the edges of that teal border. Because there's foam tape under there, I had to just cut it down a bit, and I am popping up all of these images, or most of the images, with foam tape. I did the vine and then my little monkey as well. I'm going to have him sitting up there, kind of looking down on the rest of our scene. And then his little elephant friend will be looking up at him. I added the foam tape to the back of these critters, but I did not peel off the release paper. And that is so that I could tuck the leaves behind, but have them in the exact place that I wanted to adhere them. So that's just a little tip for you if you are wanting to have things lined up but aren't ready to commit. So that way I can just lift him up and tuck all of those leaves right where I want them. I want to make sure that I'm spreading these little colored leaves around the scene. So I have that bold blue leaf on the right hand side, and I'm balancing that with another one on the left. And then I have these two aqua leaves, but I have the lion between them, and they're kind of pointed in opposite directions. So that kind of just breaks them up a bit so they aren't like right up on top of each other. I'll add another dark green leaf to the left of the lion, and now I'm ready to commit to the placement of my elephant. And then in her trunk, I wanted to add the banana, as if she is gifting that to the monkey for his birthday and trying to lure him down to join the party. And then I'm going to add the little pink balloon over on the far left. And I'll also add another little leaf there, one between the aqua and green leaves, and then another little green leaf over by the elephant. So just nice little pops of color here and there. Then I have the three little party hats, so I'm going to add one to the elephant, and then I'm going to do the one with the star on the lion, so the ones with the stripes are kind of spread out throughout the scene as well. So now I'm ready to work on my sentiment area right below my scene. So I've laid out my Jane Small Alpha die cuts, and I'm just going to glue them into place, starting with the center letter, just to make sure that I have everything spaced nicely. I will say that if you have some reverse tweezers, those would be great to use in this situation. Mine are still missing for some reason, so I am just using my little pokey tool to kind of help me maneuver them around and make sure that they are really on there nice and straight. So I'm just going to finish now. I worked my way to the right hand side, and now I'm going back and adding the last two letters over on the left. And I am justifying those toward the top because I need room for the rest of my sentiment. And I did die cut that with the Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiment banners. So it has that little fishtail on one end, and I just added a little bit of foam tape behind that. And that will give that a little bit extra dimension so it's on the same level as the frame and my critters. So the sentiment says, "Party, it's your day, go wild." And then as a finishing touch, I'm going to grab my favorite Stardust Stickles and I'm going to add a little bit to the balloon and also to each of the little party hats. And I thought about adding a bit more, but decided to just let those images shine. So that's the only place that I went ahead and added a little bit of sparkle. So I'll pick that up to the camera so you can see how that catches the light and give you another peek at the inside. I had so much fun creating this card. I really hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I post new ones every Monday and Friday. If you're interested in the products I used today, you'll find them listed and linked below the video. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.